Okay, so where I got cut off on the last video, I was about to say why we're talking about the font family in the background. So one of the things about cascading style sheets is the first word, cascading. It has a cascading effect. So if I want my paragraphs to be in Verdana, but I also want everything else to be in Verdana, it wouldn't make sense for me to do a tag for paragraph, put it in Verdana, because then I'd have to do one for the H1, the H2, the H3, and I'd end up writing code a lot. So if you can write your code up higher, and by higher I mean wider, like where you're spanning a lot of stuff. This body tag starts here and it finishes down here. So that means since we're writing the CSS for the body tag, everything that's inside of here is going to use Verdana. So it goes from general to specific. So let's say just the paragraphs in the paragraphs only we wanted to be in a different typeface. Then we would go ahead and we do that. And so the whole way that CSS works is it starts from the most general to the most specific, and something that's more, indented in the code would be more specific. So if there is nothing, it just looks up higher and says, well, you told me for the body for the font to be Verdana, so everything's going to be Verdana. And the other thing that I may have explained a little too fast was the difference between sans serif and serif. So let me do something here. What I did was I commented this statement out, and I'll tell you what that means or how to do it in a minute. But what it means is that it generally ignores it, or not generally, it does ignore it. So you can see now we're back to how the font looked in our original site. And so this is a serif font, and you can see that all the not all, but most of the letters end with some type of an embellishment on them, and those are what is known as the serifs. So if I get rid of these comments that I put on here, it changes to a sans serif, and sans just means no, like no serifs. And so talking about the CSS comments, if you go to CSS syntax, this is how you comment out a line of code. So in other words, you can just write yourself a note, and to tell the program to ignore it, you just start it with a forward slash and an asterisk, and you finish with an asterisk and a forward slash. And there's also commenting for HTML, and I'll show you that in a bit, as well as a way to not even have to remember the differences between the two. So let's go back into Dreamweaver and let me show you probably a really practical reason for commenting something out. We built some colors before, and I'm going to go ahead and type that color information in here. What I did was I just copied and pasted this from the Word doc I had before. But now you can see when you look over here, you see errors in my code, and that's because CSS can't make out what to do with this. So if I comment it out, like what you see here, then there'll be no problem. And then it's nice, easy reference up there that I can just copy and paste these as I need them. So I could do it manually. I can also go down along the sidebar, which I'm on a notebook computer here, so I need to click here and go over to this option right here for apply comment. I click on that. Well, for some reason it's not working, but typically that's what you do, is just highlight what you want and click apply comments. So I'll have to do it manually here. If I figure out what I did wrong, or if there's a problem with just this version of Dreamweaver, I'll let you know, but no big deal here. And clean that up a little bit. Started it out with document color info, move this one out a little bit because the spaces don't matter. So now it's real easy to just come in here and copy and paste this information in as I need it. One more common use of comments is you start to introduce different sections of your CSS, and all the CSS we're writing right now applies to an element, an actual HTML element, and as you'll see, we'll vary from that a little bit as we go. Just added a line of CSS here. Go ahead and do the same. This is a very old bug fix for old versions of Internet Explorer. I'm not even sure if people are still using the versions that this fixes, but it can't do any harm. I'll explain more about font sizing later on when it becomes important. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to address the color of our type. So if we think about the quick mock-up that we did, we have different color type. So when we talked about cascading, we want to go from general to specific. So we may as well do the color that's going to affect the bulk of our text, which in our case would be our paragraph. So let's go ahead and way up in the body say that all text is going to be this color, and then more specifically we will say, well, if you're a header, you're going to be this color. So what we do, go back here, still writing CSS for the body, we're going to put in color. And that's just one of those things, you don't have to say font color, it just knows. In fact, they're used to not be background color, so it kind of makes sense historically. And then we're going to go up to here, and we're going to copy that information in. So in my case, it was this dark green. Command C to copy that right here, right after the pound sign. Paste that in, put in the semicolon, and let's see if that's actually changing. It was a little bit hard to tell that that actually did change color, but if we scroll down here, we can see, you know, when it's a little bit smaller, you can see the green in it better, but larger, it looks kind of almost just like black. But let me tell you a great troubleshooting technique, in addition to putting these comments out, is for color. There is a lot of color, and I have a video on this, that is just recognized by name in CSS. So I could just type in the word red here, put a semicolon after it, and then scroll down and see that yes, indeed, all of my text, except for the links, that's a different animal, but all of my text that's in the site, from the H tags to the paragraphs, are being changed, and then I can go back and put my color in. Let's focus on this H1 tag, and let's go ahead and make that be that dark red color. So I'm going to say the element that I am trying to address, which is the H1, so that's my selector. That selector happens to be an element that exists in HTML. And then we start with our curly bracket, and then we hit the return, and then right after we hit return, that's where we start typing in our declaration, which is comprised of the property and the value. So in this case, our property is color. We follow that with a colon. We then put in the color that we want. And again, if we want, just as a test first, we can go ahead and put our value in as just an easy color, and then we can look up there and we can say, yep, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's only addressing the H1 because that's an H2 tag. And then we can go ahead and put in what we actually want, which is this color right here. Oops, having trouble grabbing that. There we go. Command C, copy, paste that in here, place of that, and we can see that that change has been made. Now, it just so happens that I also want my H2s and my H3 to be the same color. So let me go to a page that has all three. So right there, under current image of me is an H3. So let's back to the main CSS. We could, but this would be silly, we could just rewrite this, and actually I have an error there. I never finished up my closing curly bracket, so let me take care of that. And I could tell by the fact that I had red showing there. But a better way, an easier way to do this is, since the H1, the H2, and the H3 are all the same, is we can just address those all at once just by separating them with a comma. And now if we look through, we have addressed all of the H tags. Okay, so this next item that we're going to look at in the grade sheet says make the H1 font size 3 times as big as the default font size. So we have to first understand this concept of M's. to get there. So I'm going to show you best I can here using an example in Illustrator. We want to set our font size in ems rather than points. So let me explain the difference. If we set our font size in points, then what we're saying is make that font size, in this case 16 points, and keep it there. And what I mean by that is that if things around it should happen to change or scale up, then in theory that would stay the same. Or I mean, that's supposed to be the practice of it, right? Some browsers may override that, but it doesn't matter. So if you just think that if you set stuff in points, it just stays that size. So that's what's known as an absolute measurement. What we want to use is relative sizing. So we want to set this in ems. Now, what you have to understand is that 1 em equals 100%. Logically, you're probably thinking 100% of what? Well, when you open up a website like the one we made with all HTML, we didn't tell the font what size to be in the paragraphs, but yet it displayed at a reasonable size. And that has to do with the browser that's reading the website. Most browsers, the default for font size, just regular size paragraph text is 16 points. So if we use ems instead of points for our measurement, that means if we set the measurement to 1 em, it's going to be 16 points. If we set it to 2 ems, it's going to be 200% or 32 points. So the difference is now, if you imagine this is now set to ems, is what happens is if somebody happens to increase their browser size, then it goes up as well. So if they say, I want my default to be 20 points, you don't have any control over that, and you don't even have to think about it. What happens is it just automatically 100% becomes 20 points. So that's how it works on the browser end. And then on your end, as the designer, you just have to say, okay, well, I was told by my client that they want the H1 tags, the headline tags, to be 3 times the size of this normal text there. So what you have to think in terms of ems is, what does that mean? Well, I just told you 1 em is 100%, so if they want 300%, you set it to 3 ems. So let's take a look at what that means, and here again we're targeting this. Now it's wrapped in an H1 tag, and the default in HTML is that an H1 tag is the biggest, an H6 tag is the smallest headline, but in reality you're writing CSS now. You have the ultimate control. You could now say my H3s are all going to be 500 times the size of everything else, and they would be, gigantic. They'd be bigger than your H1 tags. So just keep that in mind. You are now like the boss in what you do. Now we've already written something for an H1 tag, but I can't put the size in here because it would also control the H2 and the H3. So I have to do this on my own. So I'm going to make my opening and my closing curly bracket. Going to go in here, hit return, and this is where I am going to attack the font size. So font, we learned that before, font hyphen size. In fact, whenever we can, we just let Dreamweaver do the work for us. And then we are going to put our space, and we're going to put 3 em for em, the semicolon, and then I'll hit refresh here. And why didn't that work? Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, I typed in font style, no wonder. Okay, that should be font size. There we go. See, I make these mistakes for your benefit. Yeah, so voila, there's your 3. Now, if I change this to 1em, you can see that now my H1 tag is actually smaller than my H2 tags. So that's how much control you have with CSS.